My name is Max Villman. I'm a former fighter pilot in the Swedish Air Force, and today I have the pleasure to visit Flygvapenmuseum, or the Swedish Air Force Museum in Linköping. It's going to be military history, uniforms, and of course lots and lots of aircraft and airplanes. So sit back, relax, and let's go. Let's take a quick look at Swedish Air Force uniforms involvement during the years. At first, we have the classic, more army look, the model in 1873. We can also see that the classic Air Force badge on the left-hand shoulder of this uniform. Then we have the 1906 version, which was in use quite long. Slightly less army looking, a little bit more Air Force. We have the Air Force emblem on the left-hand side. We have the classic three-point hat. And moving on, we have the Model 30. This was actually still in use when I joined back in the early 2000s. We have the flying wing up on the chest there. The flying wing is awarded once you have completed your GFU, or basic flight training in the Swedish Air Force. You are awarded your flying wings. We also have the classic Swedish Air Force hat, also still in use for the dress uniform. This time with the blue chapel, which we use in the winter months. There's also a white chapel in use for the summer months. So we actually switch chapels depending on the season. The pants you see here, the fancy pants, are above tuxedo. And if we move along, we see the Model 23, also an earlier version, even before the Model 30. And then we come up to the uniform that is partly still in use today, the Model 87. We have changed major to correspond to NATO standards, so they have removed one stripe from the major insignia on the shoulders. And this is the so-called taxi jacket. It was called the taxi jacket and still is called the taxi jacket because it's the same kind of jacket that taxi drivers in Stockholm used when they were driving their customers. So it's a short jacket that ends much higher than a normal jacket. And that is because in the old days you actually had your dress uniform on below your flying suit. So then you didn't want a long jacket below that. So instead they made this taxi jacket. This is the Saab Zafir. This was in use in the Swedish Air Force as a school and instruction plane. And for that case, it is furbished side by side, so the teacher and the student sit next to each other. Usually the student sits on the left-hand side and the teacher on the right-hand side. And this plane was in use for many years in the Swedish Air Force as the first basic aircraft where you started your flying career. Now they are still in use by several civilian flying clubs. Not in use by the Air Force anymore, but you can still see them in flying condition. This is the J21A model and the J21R model. And the difference between them is in the back. The A model is propelled by a propeller, and the J21R model is propelled by a rocket engine. It was actually the first Swedish-made rocket engine-equipped airplane. Another cool feature with the J21 is that because of the propeller in the back, a pushing propeller, we were actually forced to develop the first catapult chair, the first rocket chair, to make sure that the pilot, in case of emergency, didn't actually get hit by the propeller on his way out of the cabin. Behind me you have a Gloucester Gladiator, or J8 as it was called in the Swedish Air Force. And what's special about this airplane is that it took part in the Finnish war. Sweden had a lot of volunteers during this time, and we also transferred a lot of Air Force officers and airplanes to fight for the Finns during the Winter War 1939. And that's why you see the blue and the white swastika painted on the aircraft, because this was the actual Finnish national emblem that was painted on all Finnish aircraft up until the end of the Second World War. And the swastika was a quite widespread symbol that was used at this time and not associated with the Nazis until after the war. Gladiator behind me I wanted to show you because it's quite special. This aircraft was used in the Winter War. And at the time, it was quite usual that you changed the landing gear, the tires, to actual skis, which this Gladiator has. And skis were usually used during the winter time, where you could actually then take frozen lakes and have landing places and start and landing places all over those lakes, which of course in Finland during the winter war in wintertime you had access to a lot more places where you can start and land than you would normally have during the summer. Now I'm standing in front of a Mitsubishi Mu 2. It's the absolute newest addition to the Swedish Air Force Museum's exhibition. And this was actually operated by Saab, the company Saab, and it was used as a target tower, so it towed air targets that you could do live firing upon, but most importantly it could carry a jamming pod on this place here below the wing. And these jamming pods made it so that these airplanes could fly on the red side as a B-force and would make our exercises as fighter pilots much more realistic. Now I am in front of a UH-1 or Augusta Bell 204. In Swedish Air Force it was called the Helicopter 3B, as in Bravo. And this helicopter was in service since the 60s in the Swedish Air Force, mainly used for search and rescue. To find pilots who have ejected. It's a very famous helicopter, of course, perhaps most famous from the Vietnam War. Now I'm in front of a Vertol 44, or Helicopter 1 as it was called in the Swedish Armed Forces. This helicopter was in service with the Swedish Marine, mainly used for hunting U-boats or transporting personnel and materials across the archipelago and the coastline.